When Illness Tests Love. Chapter 1. Love in the Routine. I used to believe that love was in the big things. The grand gestures, the once-in-a-lifetime moments, the passionate declarations that made your heart race. But with Ethan, I learned something different. Love, the real kind, was in the quiet moments, the ones no one else noticed. Like the way he always made 2 cups of coffee in the morning, even when I was still asleep. Or how he absent-mindedly played with my fingers when we watched movies on the couch. Or the way he hummed to himself while cooking, a habit that used to make me laugh because he always forgot the lyrics. My name is Claire Evans. I'm 29 years old and work as an architect in Chicago. I've spent most of my life planning things, sketching blueprints, calculating structures, designing spaces where people could build their futures. My own future, however, was something I never truly planned. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. The slow unraveling. The tiny cracks I ignored. The way life was about to shift beneath my feet. That morning, I woke up before Ethan, a rare occurrence. His arm was draped over my waist, his breathing soft and even. For a few moments, I just watched him, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the peaceful look on his face. Then, I felt it. A strange tingling in my fingers. Almost like they had fallen asleep. I shook my hand, expecting the feeling to pass, but it lingered. I frowned and sat up, flexing my fingers, trying to wake them up. Maybe I had just slept in a weird position. Maybe I was overthinking. Ethan stirred beside me. His voice was thick with sleep when he mumbled, "Why are you awake so early?" I hesitated before forcing a small smile. Just couldn't sleep. He yawned and pulled me closer, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You work too much, Claire." I laughed softly, ignoring the lingering numbness in my fingers. Says the guy who stays up all night writing music. He grinned but didn't argue. Instead, he kissed my shoulder lightly before sitting up. "Come on, I'll make coffee." Just another normal morning. Just another ordinary moment. At least, that's what I told myself. But somewhere deep inside me, something whispered that it wasn't. Chapter 2. The Diagnosis That Changes Everything. I didn't think much about the numbness at first. Work kept me busy. My schedule was packed with client meetings, site visits, and endless revisions to floor plans. Whenever my fingers tingled, I rubbed them absent-mindedly and kept going. When my vision blurred for a few seconds, I blinked hard and told myself I was just tired. But then, I dropped my coffee mug one morning. It wasn't just clumsiness, I felt it slipping from my hand, and I couldn't stop it. The ceramic shattered across the kitchen floor, coffee pooling at my feet. Ethan looked up from the couch, his brows knitting together. "Claire? You okay?" I forced a smile, already bending down to clean up the mess. "Yeah, just slipped." He walked over and gently took the broken pieces from my hands. "You've been acting weird lately. You sure everything's fine?" I wanted to tell him. The words sat heavy on my tongue. But the truth felt too uncertain, too incomplete. What if it was nothing? What if I was overreacting? So I lied. "I'm fine." The doctor's office. A week later, I sat in a cold, sterile room, tapping my fingers against my knee. The neurologist, Dr. Patterson, flipped through my test results in silence. I was used to analyzing information. My job depended on it. I understood blueprints, numbers, structures. But in that moment, I couldn't read his expression. Then he sighed softly and met my eyes. "Claire, your tests show signs of multiple sclerosis." The words hit me like a collapsing building. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process. MS. A disease with no cure. A condition that could progress unpredictably. He kept talking about treatment options, symptom management, the importance of reducing stress. But his voice faded into the background, like muffled noise through a wall. Because all I could think about was Ethan. What would this mean for us? Chapter 3, The First Distance. I drove home in silence. The streets of Chicago blurred past my window, the world continuing as if nothing had changed. People walked their dogs, hurried into coffee shops, laughed on street corners. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles pale. How could everything look the same when my entire life had just shifted? When I reached my apartment, Ethan was already there, sitting on the couch with his guitar on his lap. He wasn't playing, just absent-mindedly running his fingers over the strings. As soon as he saw me, his face softened. "Hey," he said, setting the guitar aside. "You were at the doctor, right? How did it go?" I hesitated at the door, the weight of his question pressing down on me. I could tell him everything, the truth, the fear, the uncertainty. But the words refused to come. Instead, I forced a tight smile. Just a vitamin deficiency. Nothing serious. The lie came too easily. Ethan frowned. "Are you sure? You've been off lately." I shrugged, moving to the kitchen, pretending to be busy. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just tired." He didn't push. That was the thing about him, he knew when to give me space. But even as I busied myself washing a dish that wasn't even dirty, I felt the silence stretch between us like an invisible thread pulling taut. I hated lying to him. But I hated the idea of him looking at me differently even more. So I stayed quiet. And for the first time in our relationship, I felt a crack forming between us. Chapter 4, The Internal Conflict. The days passed, but the weight in my chest never lifted. I went to work, attended meetings, and reviewed blueprints like nothing had changed. But everything had. The numbness in my fingers lingered. My legs felt heavy some mornings, like they weren't entirely mine. And worst of all, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. "You're distant," he said one night as we sat on the couch. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. His voice was quiet, careful. "You barely talk to me anymore." I swallowed hard. "I've just been busy." "That's not it." His gaze was steady, searching. "Claire, if something's wrong, you can tell me." I wanted to. I wanted to fall into his arms and say, "I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen to me." But if I did, I knew what would follow, the concern, the questions, the pity. And I couldn't bear it. So I forced a small smile and leaned against him, hoping my silence would be enough of an answer. He didn't press further. He just pulled me close, his hand absent-mindedly tracing circles on my back. And for a moment, I let myself believe that if I held him tightly enough, I could keep this fragile version of our life intact. But deep down, I knew I was only delaying the inevitable. Chapter 5: The attempt to let go. The decision to leave him came quietly. Not in a dramatic moment, not in a rush of tears, but in the stillness of an ordinary afternoon. I was at work, staring at my laptop screen, pretending to care about a project deadline when the realization settled deep in my chest. I couldn't do this to him. I couldn't let Ethan love me only to watch me become someone I wasn't sure I could even recognize. I couldn't let him stay, waiting for a future that might never come the way we imagined. So I made up my mind. I would end it before he had the chance to realize how much I would cost him. The goodbye that wasn't. That evening, I waited for him at my apartment, my heart pounding so hard it made my ribs ache. I rehearsed the words in my head. This isn't working. I need space. We want different things. All lies. But they would make it easier. The door opened, and there he was, hair slightly messy from the wind, his guitar case slung over his shoulder. He looked at me and smiled, just like always. But something inside me cracked. He set his guitar down and walked over, pressing a light kiss to my forehead. "Hey, you okay?" I nodded, but my throat was tight. This was it. I had to say it. I had to let him go. But before I could, he sighed and sat down. "Claire, I know something's wrong. I don't need you to explain everything. I just need to know, are you in this with me? Or are you already halfway out the door?" The air in the room felt impossibly thick. I should have said yes, I'm leaving. It would have been easier. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Ethan held my gaze, waiting. And for the first time, I saw something in his expression that I hadn't noticed before, not just concern, but fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of me shutting him out. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. I need time, Ethan. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. He didn't fight me. He didn't beg me to explain. And somehow, that made it even worse. Chapter 6: The Turning Point. I thought I had time. Time to figure out how to be alone again. Time to ease Ethan out of my life without hurting him too much. Time to convince myself that letting go was the right thing to do. But time doesn't wait for you to be ready. It moves forward, whether you want it to or not. The moment everything changed, I was in Cleveland for a client meeting, a quick overnight trip for work. The kind of thing I used to do effortlessly. But that morning, as I stepped out of the hotel shower, a sudden wave of weakness hit me. My legs trembled, then gave out completely. I barely caught myself against the sink. Panic rose in my chest. Breathe, Claire. It'll pass. I gripped the counter, forcing myself to stand, but my knees buckled again. This wasn't like the numbness in my hands or the fatigue I had learned to push through. This was different. This was my own body refusing to hold me up. And for the first time, I was truly afraid. The call I didn't want to make. I don't remember grabbing my phone, only that my fingers shook as I scrolled through my contacts. I hesitated when I reached his name. Ethan. I had spent weeks trying to pull away from him, and now, in the moment I needed help the most, he was the only person I could think to call. The phone barely rang twice before he answered. Claire? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Silence. Then his voice softened. Where are you? The question broke something inside me. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, I don't know what to do. I'm on my way. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him not to come. Because deep down, I had known the truth all along. I didn't want to do this alone. Chapter 7, the first step toward letting him in. Ethan arrived in less than 5 hours. I didn't ask how he managed to drop everything and get here so fast. I just knew that he would. By the time he knocked on my hotel room door, my body had recovered enough for me to stand on my own. My mind, however, was another story. I hesitated before opening the door, my fingers gripping the handle too tightly. Because once I saw him, once I let him in, there would be no pretending that things were fine. But I couldn't avoid him forever. I pulled the door open. His eyes swept over me immediately, scanning, assessing. He didn't say anything at first, he never rushed words when they mattered, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. Then, finally, his gaze met mine. Are you okay? The question was simple. The answer was not. The weight of silence. I stepped aside to let him in. The room felt smaller with him there, or maybe I just felt smaller standing next to someone who refused to let me disappear into myself. Ethan dropped his bag near the bed, then turned to face me, waiting. I could have lied again. I could have told him it wasn't a big deal. But the truth sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. So, for the first time, I let it out. I have multiple sclerosis. The words sounded foreign even to me. Saying them made them real in a way that a doctor's diagnosis hadn't. Ethan didn't react right away. He didn't gasp, didn't rush to comfort me, didn't tell me everything would be okay. He just absorbed it. Then, after a long moment, he exhaled softly and said, okay. The kind of love that doesn't flinch. I blinked. Okay? He nodded, his expression calm. Okay. Like it was a fact. Like it didn't change anything. And just like that, the fear that had been gripping my chest loosened, just a little. I didn't want to tell you, I admitted, my voice quiet. I didn't want you to feel like you had to. Stay, he finished for me. I swallowed hard. Yeah. Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying me. Then, in that same steady voice, he said, Claire, if you think I'm here because I feel obligated, then you really don't know me at all. The words hit harder than I expected. I turned away, walking toward the window, pressing my palms against the glass. Outside, the city moved as if nothing in the world had changed. But inside, everything had. I felt Ethan step closer. He didn't touch me, didn't push, but I could feel him there. Then, softly, he said, "You're not protecting me by shutting me out." I closed my eyes. For weeks, I had convinced myself that I was doing the right thing by pushing him away, that I was saving him from a future full of uncertainty. But what if I had been wrong? What if I had been trying to protect myself instead? Chapter 8: The Beginning of Acceptance. I didn't turn around right away. Ethan was standing behind me, his presence steady, waiting. Not pushing. Not demanding. Just there. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel the comfort of that. I watched the city through the hotel window, lights flickering in a rhythm I had always found soothing. But tonight, everything felt different. I felt different. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know how to do this." Ethan didn't ask what this meant. He already knew. Choosing to let him stay. I turned to face him, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I let someone see me, really see me. The fear. The doubt. The weight of everything I had been carrying alone. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't try to fix it, didn't offer empty reassurances. He just nodded, like he understood. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But we don't have to figure it all out tonight." I let out a slow breath. "You really want to stay?" His lips curved slightly. "That's not even a question, Claire." I searched his face for hesitation, for uncertainty. But there was none. Just the same quiet certainty that had always defined him. And I realized then that love wasn't about knowing how everything would turn out. It was about choosing someone even when you didn't have all the answers. I took a step forward. Just one. A small movement, but a decision all the same. Ethan noticed. His fingers brushed against mine, a silent question, not a demand. This time, I didn't pull away. I let my hand slip into his. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying this alone. Chapter 9: Love in the Uncertainty. Ethan didn't try to fix anything. He didn't promise that everything would be okay. He didn't list medical facts or ask what came next. He just sat with me. Like that was enough. And maybe, for the first time, it was. A moment of peace. We didn't talk much that evening. I ordered room service, and we ate on the floor like college kids, backs against the bed. Ethan stole half my fries. I let him. At one point, he pulled out his guitar and started playing softly. It was a melody I recognized, a song he'd written years ago but never finished. I tilted my head. "You still haven't figured out the lyrics?" He smiled. "Not yet." I knew he would someday. Ethan never left anything unfinished. And as I watched him play, his fingers moving effortlessly over the strings, I thought about how I had spent weeks convincing myself that I had to walk away. But Ethan had never believed that love was about perfection. He had always been someone who stayed, even when things were uncertain. I exhaled slowly, the tightness in my chest easing just a little. Maybe we didn't need all the answers right now. Maybe just being here was enough. Chapter 10: The New Beginning. Morning came quietly. Soft light filtered through the hotel curtains, painting the room in pale gold. I stirred, stretching my legs carefully, half expecting the same weakness from yesterday. But I felt okay. Not perfect. Not fixed. Just okay. And that was enough. Ethan was still asleep beside me, his breathing slow and steady. His arm rested loosely over my waist, like some part of him, even in sleep, still refused to let me drift too far. For weeks, I had tried to push him away. I had convinced myself that walking away was the best way to protect him. But Ethan had never been someone who needed protection from love. And neither was I. A choice, not a condition. I shifted slightly, and his eyes fluttered open. He blinked at me, then gave me one of those quiet, half-awake smiles that always made my chest ache. "Hey," he murmured. "Hey," I said back. He studied me for a moment, his gaze lingering, not with pity, not with hesitation, but with recognition. Like he saw all the parts of me I had tried to hide, and he was still here anyway. "I have no idea what's going to happen," I admitted softly. Ethan nodded. "I know. And you're really okay with that?" His fingers found mine beneath the covers, his grip firm but easy. Steady. "Claire, love isn't knowing the whole map before you start the journey. It's deciding to walk together, even when you don't know exactly where the road leads." I let his words settle deep in my chest. For so long, I had believed that love needed certainty, that I had to be whole to be worthy of it. But Ethan was right, love wasn't about perfect conditions. It was about choosing someone, over and over, no matter what. I squeezed his hand. Just a small movement, but a decision all the same. Ethan's smile deepened. "So, are we still planning that trip to the West Coast? Or did you cancel my plane ticket while you were trying to get rid of me?" I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. "I didn't get that far." "Well," he said, stretching lazily, "good. Because I was thinking maybe we should drive instead." "No rush. Just take the long way, stop when we feel like it." I looked at him, something warm and certain settling inside me. A road trip. No clear destination. Just the promise of moving forward. Together. Maybe that was what love really was. Not perfect. Not predictable. But chosen. Every single day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Check out our other videos, you won't want to miss them. See you next time.